Over the last few years, medical affairs has evolved far beyond medical education and the conventional dissemination of scientific information. In pharma, medical affairs now sits at the intersection of science, strategy, and patient outcomes. And today, we are diving deep into that transformation to look at the future of medical affairs and the future of pharma at large. Welcome to Amplifiz Podcast. We are very proud to be the #1 pharma and MedTech innovation podcast channel on YouTube. Please consider hitting the subscribe button now, and we look forward to your comments, your questions, and likes as you watch this new episode. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Ankur Gupta, the Global Head of Medical Strategy and Development at Menarini. We will explore the evolving identity of medical affairs, both internally and externally, how data and precision medicines are reshaping healthcare, whether our industry is truly patient-centric or still product-focused. We will also explore leadership in the age of AI, the importance of emotional intelligence, and the lessons that only experience can teach. If you work in pharma, MedTech, medical affairs, or commercial and access functions, this episode is for you. Dr. Gupta or Ankur, welcome to Amplifiz Podcast. Very happy to have you. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, William. It's pleasure is all mine. It's always fun, and we learn a lot whenever we meet. And I really like the way you have set the context that medical affairs is at the intersection of science, strategy, and patient outcome. I think if we had to do this podcast in 1 minute, we could go home because that's the message.
Well, we need to make it in a few more minutes because I think we have an opportunity with you on the show to obviously go a bit deeper in all of that. But not everybody watching us is necessarily a medical affairs professional or an expert in our industry just yet. So explain to me in simple terms what medical affairs does in pharma, and maybe talk about your role specifically, strategy and development at Menarini.
Medical affairs is a function which sits right in the center of where the evidence is generated and where the evidence is implemented. Okay? So you have clinical trials and they are done by scientists and the data is generated. But once that data is out in the field, when the product is launched, how do you communicate the scientific value, the patient-related messaging? How do you communicate where does the product sit in the treatment paradigm is where medical affairs comes in. So I would say we are privileged to be involved at every stage of life cycle, starting from phase 3, phase 4 to pre-launch, launch,
Right.
and then life cycle management, and then also end of life cycle management.
Yeah.
So our primary customers, or I will say stakeholder, is the healthcare providers. But also in this new setting, and I will talk more about that, it's no longer just the prescriber. The stakeholder sophistication and their demands have increased beyond what we can imagine. So now there are payers, there are patient advocacy groups, there are HTA bodies. So medical affairs right in the thick of things.
Right.
Coming to my role specifically, so I moved to this global role starting 1st January this year. So I was in core medical affairs till last December, where I was heading Asia Pacific Medical Affairs department. But now I am more in the global team dealing with new product assessments, life cycle management of the mature portfolio. And my organization, Menarini, has a mixed bag of portfolio. So we have specialty care, primary care, consumer care. So in that, where can medical add in more value in an 8 hours working day? First 4 hours, I spend mainly on new product evaluation. Across the globe, what's new happening, innovation in terms of different therapy areas, oncology, immunology, obesity, right? Because that's a part of my job, which is new product evaluation, business development. The next 2 hours I spend on, I have 30, 40-year-old molecules, which are still the bread and butter. Right? How do I see to add medical value, to generate more data for the life cycle management? And the last 2 hours is for the consumer care. How can I maximize my portfolio and use this OTC OTX strategy, right? That a product is over the counter, but if I can match or club it with a prescription product and both go together, and that helps in the overall portfolio approach. So thanks to the new role, it's quite interesting because you got to dabble with everything.
Talk to me a little bit about the evolution of medical affairs over the last few years, and we will talk about the future after that.
Sure. This is one of my favorite topics, William, that how medical affairs function has evolved, I would say, in the last 40, 50 years. In the beginning, this function was more of a rubber stamp. Our role was mainly to approve the promotional materials, just to make sure it is on label. We are not making any outlandish claims, and we stay medico-legally correct, right? So we had to look at the brochures, the leave behind materials, have an occasional advisory board, ask doctors, how's the product doing? So we were pretty much product physicians. Then came the era of that medical affairs starting interacting more with the healthcare professionals in terms of real world. We are doing investigator-initiated studies, generating evidence once the drug is already in the market, and giving those insights to the marketing team to shape their marketing strategy. Now, in the last 20 years, medical affairs is slowly trying to get a seat on the high table, as to say that we are no longer a support function, but very much a third strategic pillar, with the first two being R&D and commercial. And as they say, in adversity lies opportunity. And I would say, thanks to COVID-19, suddenly medical affairs has been catapulted into the spotlight, where I would dare say you can't do without medical affairs.
So why specifically with COVID-19 this shifted?
COVID-19 perhaps remains the most disruptive event of our lives, and more so for the pharma and the healthcare industry. The stakeholder expectations changed. The traditional patient journeys were reconfigured. Medical and pharma no longer remained no longer had the monopoly of the evidence in them. So they had to think of novel ways. How do I engage with doctors, go above the brand, beyond the pill, and still convey my message of my drug and perhaps add something extra? And patient came at the center of this, and product-centric approach suddenly took a back seat, because traditionally how pharma makes their strategies, product is in the center, and you built the entire web around it of marketing, of HCP contact, of patients and everything. But now it's demanded that we put patient in the center and then see how we can optimize their outcomes by helping physicians who are the primary caregivers. So it's drug plus service model and not drug alone.
Right. And so this is a very interesting evolution of the medical affair function, but frankly, of the entire opportunity for the industry at large.
I think I want to talk a little bit about the virtues, the medical affair virtue, what the new age medical affairs professional needs to have, which it did not need 20 years ago. And I call it medical affairs vowel virtue. Okay, just remember the
Repeat
5 vowels.
That. Medical affairs what? Sorry?
Vowel, EAIOU.
Okay.
So that's my mnemonic, that what are the key attributes we need to have. So E stands for engagement and empathy. A is analysis and articulation. I is insights and intelligence. O is outcomes, which is patient outcomes. And U is understanding the care pathway. Plus, add, you need to be commercially savvy. No longer profit is a bad word. Medical affairs has to be pro-profit, pro-patient, pro-propriety.
How do you create a clear balance between the compliance requirements and at the same time this business mindset? And what does it? Give me some examples of how it translates concretely in an organization.
It's a tightrope walk, But I am from that unconventional brigade who doesn't believe in the age-old hyper-conservatism. Yes, you cannot be non-compliant, but you cannot be so risk averse that you miss the opportunities to interact with patients in this new world. In this new age, patient is my stakeholder and not just the HCP. Now, traditionally, pharma cannot reach out to the patients directly unless it's a direct-to-consumer product. But still, you have to find novel ways of finding patient journeys, unmet patient needs, where I can do a patient support program, finding insights, and giving all of this to my marketing team and say, guys, this is what is happening in the real world space. You need to tailor your messages, your communication, your strategies based upon this, the voice of the customer.
Right.
Now, you said traditionally pharma medical affairs have been very much like with blinders that keep a firewall between commercial and market access, and we are just creators of evidence, we are pro-patient. But the time for that approach is long over.
Okay.
For me, the onus lies on medical affairs, not the commercial guys to include us in. We have to deserve a seat at the high table. I have to be commercially savvy. I should know my YTD. I should know my Excel charts. I should know my year-end statements.
How to read a P&L.
How to read a P&L. Yes, of course. For me, I encourage all my team members that, guys, please sit with marketeers. You should know that. I always say magic of science lies in making it simple.
Right.
Okay. So medical affairs has to talk the language which is easily comprehensible. Now, with this background in mind, data suddenly has become the most important talking point. And data was always the monopoly of the pharma because majority of the data was produced within pharma companies. We did phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But now there is a democratization of the data. Data is being produced in the social media space. Our hospitals, our clinics have electronic medical records. They are doing their analysis. They are generating their own data and making changes in their care pathways. So majority of the data is produced outside the pharma company. So the information is everywhere. So the cynic would say, if information is everywhere, why do we need medical affairs? Right? My point is, it's a huge journey from information to improved patient outcomes, which follows the steps of information has to be converted into insights, insights into actionable insights into interaction with the HCPs, and based upon their feedback, implementation of the ideas, and then comes the improved patient outcomes.
Right.
And you cannot do that, the whole data analytics piece, without medical affairs.
Talking about skills now, because the complexity of the data topic, as you just alluded to, is very broad and very deep in each of these siloed activities. So what is the data literacy of our med affairs peers at large? Where do you think the main opportunity or challenges lies for us?
Well, William, I have hired many people in the last 5 years because I raised a APAC team in my previous role. And one of my requirements is data and digital literacy.
Right.
One of the essential components that new age medical affairs people need to have. Now, data is not just knowledge where the data lies, but your scientific acumen lies in dissecting the data. And we are in the era of precision medicine, where HCPs practice precision medicine, medical affairs has to help them with personalized medicine. How I can dissect this data to find what fits a particular patient profile. Because this is where the science is moving, that there is no longer one size fits all, and you not only need to have specific medicines for specific patients, but specific messages for specific doctors.
Right. And you talked earlier about the fact that there was data all over, and you mentioned social media and others. What does it mean for us in med affairs? I mean, can we even concretely have any use of this data? What is the opportunity, if any?
Absolutely. I mean, not only for the patient benefit and HCPs and for the lifecycle management, interestingly, your regulatory bodies, your payers, HTA bodies are becoming more receptive to the real world insights which come from the day-to-day observational studies. So there are different aspects you can get this data from. One is a formalized research where you just do observational, long-term, longitudinal studies just to see how the drugs, how the treatment is given in a normal clinical setup. And then you pick up treatment patterns and then you derive conclusions from that. The other interesting aspect which has changed, particularly after COVID, is clinical research has become very expensive. Patients are also generating their own data. We are all wearing wearable devices which detect our sleep patterns, our heart rates, our blood pressures. Plus, there is a whole social media buzz. We have chatbots telling patients how to consume a particular drug. We have podcasts, we have blogs written by doctors and patient bodies. So there is huge data space. And then there is the e-commerce, which again helps to add diversity to this data. Now, I am very passionate about non-clinical trial, novel evidence generation pathways. Okay. You can actually access databases of big hospitals, electronic medical records, payer records, insurance records. You can do some mechanical learning tools to detect social media buzz. What's the chatter happening around a particular disease or the evolution of a particular medicine? And all of these, I call them softer evidence, but still, I mean, some people may criticize me for saying this, but I believe some data is better than no data.
Right.
Okay. So all of this data really helps to enrich the data pool which is there, which is usually from the phase 3, phase 4.
Are we truly patient-centric? Are we still product-centric? And talk to me about the needs of patients and how do you envision this?
So every pharma company says we are patient-centric.
That's what they say indeed.
That's the DNA of what we do. But in order to walk the talk, what we have seen is that you have to identify the opportunity moments at every stage of product life cycle where patients' inputs can be incorporated. We start with designing new clinical trials based upon patient-reported outcomes as one of the outcome measures. I think that's a big change now. Patient satisfaction, quality of life questionnaires, these are essential now, especially in the real world space, if you want to drive value-based pricing discussions with the HTA bodies. That how is the patient perceiving the benefit, the satisfaction? So in the clinical trial space, you look for outcomes which are patient-centric. Then comes, how do you support the patient at different stages of their journey? And here what I call is patient journey mapping. Okay, I was very proud of one initiative that we conducted a few years ago is we mapped the journey of patients across 2 chronic diseases, which is hypertension and osteoarthritis, which patient usually suffers for 20, 30 years in their life cycle. And classically, there are only 2 fragments that we understand: clinical needs, access needs. Right? But where we falter is what's the behavioral need and what's the emotional need of the patients. For a chronic therapy that patient has to take over 20 years, the motivation falls. You get frustrated, right? There are emotional ups and downs, right? So how do you map that? So we did this mapping across 4 quadrants: clinical, access, emotional, and behavioral needs, and found what are the gaps of care delivery at pre-diagnosis, diagnosis, long-term follow-up. And then plugged, can we as a private pharmaceutical company plug that gap or not? And what is that small incremental change that we can deliver in this patient journey mapping? This is truly what I call being patient-centric. Right. That I put patient's need in the front and then stitched my product offering, not only product, but product plus service offering around it.
Right now, you feel that the industry at large is still looking at the patient from only these 2 dimensions as opposed to the 4?
Answer is yes. But what I see, William, this is the finest hour for medical affairs, if you honestly ask me. And the next 5 years, we are going to cross new frontiers in patient engagement in compliant way. and thinking novel ways of how I can reach out to the patient, not to influence, but to learn. And we have still just touched the surface of it. You cannot remain insulated and isolated in this world where data is everywhere. The patients are having patient advocacy groups. They are talking, they want to be made a stakeholder. We have not cracked that puzzle, but I'm happy to see that medical affairs is talking that language to their C-suite, to their strategy, to their CEOs, that's going to be in our brand strategies.
You also mentioned the other stakeholders in the ecosystem, right?
Yes, we have other stakeholders in market access, HTA bodies, regulators, creating value, communicating value. Okay? But for me, I think we have long held ourselves back in not being an important medium in the care delivery. It's time medical affairs develops that trusts with physicians, with patients, with public, that yes, we are not just profit-oriented professionals, we can add to improved patient outcomes. In every disease, in every hospital, there are treatment protocols, right? Guidelines that once the patient lands in the A&E, what to be done, then he goes into the ICU, then comes to the ward. So there is a guidelines and protocols. These are care pathways, which are classically based upon experience, evidence, years of use. How do you as a medical affairs person do an analysis of this care pathway? Is this an efficient pathway? Is it incorporating the innovations which have happened recently? And is it leading to improved patient outcomes or not? This analysis is something which medical affairs can do with the help of certain other service providers. So that's one. And then secondly, you can map an innovative solution. You can map a patient journey, but you have to configure the both. By configuring two becomes a new clinical decision support system, which is just an improvised care pathway which incorporates the patient needs and the innovation which has recently happened. And this cross-section, this language, this grammar of intervention is the subject matter expertise of the medical affairs for future.
Talk to me a little bit more about the internal aspect of it now, your leadership style, what you have learned throughout the years.
Let me first talk about the internal dimension of medical affairs and how we are kind of jostling our space within the hierarchy of a of a pharmaceutical company. So, as I said, we are slowly but surely becoming custodians of data and knowledge. There is a realization in the commercial colleagues, in the cross-functional stakeholder colleagues, that medical affairs not only is generator of data, but communicator of data and can articulate the value. So I think slowly we are moving out of the shadows of a support function to be a truly strategic pillar. But again, a lot of it is still a show horse and not a workhorse. Okay. It is happening in some organizations, but it's still not across the board.
The mainstream.
But it's for sure that medical affairs is coming out of the shadows. And I think next 5 years, you are going to see medical affairs having a more pronounced role.
Yeah, I just want to interrupt you on this because the other perception I had was that not only what you described is absolutely accurate, but I felt this was also influenced directly by the HCPs who are overly tired of promotional and low value content or reps knocking at their door all the time. They want to have very meaningful insights from their peers and even the rise of MSLs on the ground and so on. I mean, I am old enough to remember a time where this was not a very common function either.
Yes.
That's kind of what I had in mind listening to you.
Absolutely. There was a research that Accenture, I think if I'm getting it right, did after COVID, that more than 80% of the doctors, after the COVID was over, still didn't want to go back to the one-on-one, face-to-face pharma engagement model.
That is telling on itself.
They were pretty happy with this virtual. But again, excess of virtual communication. Now the doctors and the HCP said, don't give me another app.
Right.
I already have proposals of so many apps. So again, I think it is driven by the demand of the times we live in. But again, you have to find here the Not when we say patient journey mapping, there is a HCP experience mapping,
of course,
which is an omni-channel engagement. How do you personalize their experience of engaging with you, which is connected, which is contextualized, and still not overbearing?
Right. Yeah. So we need to go back to the internal aspect in a second, but let's stay on this omni-channel experience first, because that's the other thing too. The sales organization is going to use a CRM. The med affair team might store data somewhere else. We all talk about omni-channel and how wonderful and seamless it is, but the reality is that most pharma companies are still on this journey of building that experience. So concretely, as an HCP, I meet a rep on a Thursday. I happen to have another track of discussion with an MSL that I meet the following week. In the meantime, I receive marketing emails and other things of this nature. So concretely, to be very tangible here, sales organization or commercial organization and medical affairs, how do they work together concretely to avoid disrupting the so-called CX, this customer experience?
Oh, absolutely. And I always tell my peers, always think that you are the physician. If a person from company X is coming to meet me from medical affairs, next day the commercial, for me it's one pharma company. I do not care which function do you belong.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's right.
That's why the whole omni-channel integration is so important. It can't happen in this world that my rep is giving a message about the phase 3 study recently launched. Then MSL comes, he talks about, I want to do a new real world study with you. And commercial is talking about, we had bad sales last month. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. The customer experience, which is connected and contextualized. In that, the integration of MSLs to the CRM is mandatory. And I'm glad that in our organization, we did that last year in-house, that MSLs are also on the CRM platform, which is there usually for the sales reps.
Right.
And there is a mutual visibility. Of course, there are certain firewalls because there are certain scientific concepts which only a medical affairs professional can talk. But generally, there should be a visibility of that what's the flavor or the topic of the month this time with this particular HCP.
Perfect.
And then everything has to flow from that. Right? If I have to share the results of a recently published real world study, then I have to make sure that my sales reps, my commercial guy, my MSL, and whatever I send through the emailers, through the curtain raisers has to be consistent.
I interrupted you earlier. You were on the track of talking about the internal dynamic, how you create your space at this table. So let's continue that discussion on your reflection as a leader.
I think the philosophy, and since there are new medical affairs folks who are also listening to this, think about the speed, the breadth, and the depth of your product getting into the HCP practice. Now, speed, breadth, and depth will be determined by infrastructure, intelligence, and engagement. If I want a faster launch, early access, right, I have to make some infrastructural changes. From medical affairs, how can I help? New innovative clinical trial designs, virtual trials, decentralized trials, faster access pathways. This is the way I am adding value to my organization by providing early access, faster launch. So speed is critical. I'm just saying certain things so that you realize how medical affairs can add value and be a strategic function.
Absolutely.
Next is breadth. How do I want that a maximum number of doctors use my product? That's the sum and substance of marketing, right? How do I get maximum number of doctors? This drives engagement. How do I engage in a novel way for medical affairs professionals? Either it's through investigator-initiated trials, either it's through advisory boards, omni-channel, conferences, publications, so that I reach out to the maximum number of doctors.
Right.
And finally, the depth, which is how can I have my product being used in maximum number of indications and for the right duration, days of therapy, to increase the depth of my prescription. right? All of this, what I'm saying, is music to a marketeer's ears, right? So how can medical affairs do that? Which is increasing the depth, which means I need to generate more data. Life cycle management. How do I access what's happening? Even if my drug is 20 years old, still can I do something scientifically to extend the indication, a new formulation, a fixed dose combination? So these are the ways medical affairs has to say that, guys, you cannot have any discussion about the brand and the product, and I will bring in the patient perspective in that discussion.
Success is a team sport, as I like to say.
Yeah.
And I think this applies well to all of us in corporate roles.
Yeah.
You cannot achieve this alone. So talk to me a little bit about, or rather, what do you think your team members would say to define your leadership style?
Well, the first thing they say that the favorite line for Ankur is digitalize, but don't dehumanize.
Uh-huh.
You know,
I like it.
in the era of AI, you cannot forget EI, which is emotional intelligence, right? I am hearing that some of our AI tools are even advising on emotions and managing relationship these days, but I will save that maybe for future. But again, the most important part is you have to remember at the end of the day, we are not mechanical tools, right? We have emotions which go up and down. So for me, I as a part of my post-9 passion, I do give lectures on emotional intelligence. I have done this for my office bearers and everyone. So I love that. That how do you incorporate this sense that going forward, and you have to make a differentiation between sympathy and empathy. Okay, sympathy means I'm happy what you're suffering is not happening to me.
Okay. It's pretty different.
Okay. Empathy is I'm ready to be in your shoes and I understand. Okay. But overall leadership has to be so. My mantra has been, if your team is winning, be your team's cheerleader. If your team is losing, be your team's spokesperson. I think a leader has to know the way, go the way, and show the way. And invest in people's strengths. We all say, let's work on our deficiencies. Say, work on your strengths first. Maximize the strengths of people. You should know how to allocate your resources for the right purposes.
Right.
I think the difference between manager and a leader is manager will optimize performance. Leader will maximize the potential. So I think that's my philosophy overall. And in general, for pharma and for medical affairs, I always tell them, think like a physician from the heart, but be a marketer in the head.
As we are wrapping up, what are the takeaways you would like our audience to take from today?
Okay, I love mnemonics. So I will say evidence. Medical affairs is going to be the champions of evidence. Wherever it is generated in the real world space, in the social media space, or in the clinical trial space. So occupy that. Second, strategy. Think about how the therapy landscape is going to shift. No one knows it better than you, especially from the patient perspective. Be there to voice it. Third, articulate. Medical affairs guys are usually not good communicators. And I always tell my people, your biggest support group is your sales rep or your marketing guy who tells you, can you visit this doctor? Because once you visit, I get a foothold, I get a longer time in the clinic with the doctor. Okay. And finally, be a decision maker. One of our seniors used to say, you know why there is MD in front of your names? Because make a decision. Right? So quite often we are very cautious. Rather than asserting ourselves, we hide behind the data. But go out, make a decision, because I know your HCPs, they are needing your help. They need your hand holding to make much more intelligent, informed clinical decisions.
This is awesome, Ankur. And you have been very, very insightful throughout the conversation, but your ability to articulate, to your point, and to summarize, it is very important because that makes a huge difference in the ability for audience to get something tangible out of it.
Thank you.
And so that's awesome. Thank you so much, Ankur, for being with me today, for sharing great insights about medical affairs today and in the future, inspiring our peers to innovate, to dare, to make decisions.
Thank you so much, William. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure. And I would love to have discussions on various topics. As many times in my conversation, I've said, let's leave it for the next one.
That's right.
So we have topics for our next conversation.
One of which is cricket. So are you gonna?
Of course.
It's gonna be a monologue because I have a lot to learn in this one.
Sure.
As to all of you, thank you so very much for watching Amplifiz Pharma and MedTech Innovation Podcast with Dr. Gupta from Menarini. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to leave your comments, questions in the chat. Subscribe to our channel, give us a like, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.